That's new. Anyway, okay.
One actually, yeah.
Hello, my name is Veronica Zalis, and I am the director of the Athenaeum. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for a panel discussion with artists from our current exhibition, Timeless Tradition, featuring master copyists from the National Gallery of Art Copyist program. This program offers unique opportunities for artists to study the techniques of old masters through intimate study in the galleries. Today's discussion will be led by three master copyists, Bruce Campbell, Tanya Rowland, and Tom Sems. Topics will include the history of copying, as well as their own personal experience with learning from the great masters. Then we will wrap up with a question and answer session. So if you have any questions during the program, please send them to us using the chat tool, and we will get to them later in the program. During the talk, please mute yourselves and stop video. We will be recording this program. And now I would like to turn to Bruce Campbell, one of the longest running copyists with an impressive 25 years of experience copying the masters. Bruce, please introduce yourself, and then you're going to go over the history of copying.
Well, first, thank you, Veronica, and the Athenaeum staff, and this wonderful opportunity to present. And I welcome everyone to go to the actual show and to participate in this panel discussion. My name is Bruce I. Campbell, and again, I'm an artist, regional to the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. And I'm going to start with just a little abbreviated history of my idea of what copying is from somewhat of an historical perspective, and then into the more contemporary idea of what copying is. And then I'll do a little brief personalized discussion on what copying means to me. So I guess I'd like to start by saying that we probably most know this proverb: imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And so when you think of that, it kind of brings to mind imitation and replicating and copying or mimicking someone else. And we know throughout history that skill sets were developed by mankind, and learning from each other was the best scenario. I'd like the first slide of the European cave. Fantastic. So when we look at this image, we say, I wonder if one individual actually did this work, or was it a community project? And I stand to think somewhat like building a home or shelter or hunting or gathering, that it was a group activity. And I don't see how art would have been that much different. At least there would have been someone probably getting together the pigments, someone who had the skills to draw, and maybe even preparating of the stone. I'd like to go to the second image of the African
Oops. I'm sorry it's so small, Bruce.
cave painting. Again, and what we as mankind have done. So there weren't very many regions in the world, even back in the Ice Age, that would have elephants in their imagery. So again, we're talking about one corner of the earth. We're talking about another corner of the earth. I'd like to go next to Asia, or in fact to the Americas. And this is in the Amazon. Likewise, it looks somewhat cluttered, but they are really, instead of having a written language, they are actually emphasizing their whole lifestyle. And so as you can see here, there is a lot of details of their lifestyle and probably a chronology. And there is some imagery of some type of, if not text, some type of writing skill set. And we can see
Bruce, your audio is cutting out.
Other items. And the last, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So again, we can see many hands. All of these are cave paintings, and they were found much later than when they were produced. I think this was 12 to 10,000 years ago. The European was actually 20,000 years ago. So thinking about coming forward, copying wasn't really documented, or at least I couldn't find any instance where it was documented until the 15th century, and an artist, Cennino Cennini. And this is documented. It was originally in Italian, and he actually documented how important, and that's going to be the 6th slide, the book. In
Is that the one?
fact, first let's show the image. There's the two images of, one is the original artist and the second is his replica. Looking at this, is anyone able to tell who did which?
It's a little hard to see. It's kind of.
I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
So again, he was pretty active. And again, but hopefully we get the idea that this is the 15th century and we were already starting to document this skill set or this process of copying. The next slide is actually a quote by Cellino, and that would be slide
Is it that one?
6. Slide 7. There we go. Perfect. So I quote, "When you've practiced drawing for a while, take pains and pleasure to constantly copying the best works that you can find done by the hand of great masters." So that's a pretty powerful quote that he actually witnessed and practiced this so many decades ago. And the next slide, it's a metal plate by a Dutch artist. And in fact, this was done 100 years earlier than it was copied in Van Ounce's painting, the Dead Game, Still Life of Dead Game, which we'll show right after this. But this is actually a metal plate of Diana and Actaeon. And as you can see, pretty vivid, pretty accurate figurative work. And you have Diana to the far left. Actually, no, in fact, those are some of her ladies in waiting. At the bottom in the center is Actaeon's dog. And you see bottom, but nearly in the right-hand corner is Diana in her modesty trying to cover herself. And Actaeon is in the dead center there, and he's actually starting to grow horns from a stag because she was so angered by it. I think the slide for the Van Ounce is a Word document. Twig, can we find
Word
that?
will not open in preview, so.
Okay. Well, I'll share that later. But if you have the opportunity, this is a work that's at the National Gallery of Art, and the bottom third of the painting of these dead animals from a hunt, from aristocratic Dutch, I guess business owners and merchants, had plenty of time on their hands, and he replicated this scene into the bottom quarter. There we go.
There you go.
The bottom quarter of his painting. And it's so unconspicuous that it took a while before I actually noticed it. But you see, it's exquisitely done. And it mimics marble instead of the metal plate that originally had been done by Van Vienen. Fantastic. So moving forward, little known fact that the Louvre was one of the first public places where copying was approved. And the irony is that it was about the same time that Marie Antoinette was executed. And about a month later, the king opened up the gallery to any artist. So trying to make it a public domain. And so as you can imagine, over that time frame, some of the greats, most of the impressionists, discussed how important it was for them to copy the old masters. And I actually have a slide of the Louvre
Okay.
with somewhat contemporary artists and all showing their works.
Which slide do you want now?
I think that's 11. Scroll down. The Louvre.
That's number 11, is Reuben at the Ringling Museum.
It might be image 10. I see Louvre copyist right above it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Bruce, we've lost your audio again.
Go. 10.
Bruce, if you stop your video, sometimes your audio comes out better. Can we hear you now? No.
We may have lost Bruce for a little bit.
He's still there. His audio is turned off.
Yeah, I think he's just I think the Wi-Fi is having a problem.
Shall we instead move to somebody else and come back to Bruce?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, let's do that.
Tanya, do you want to take over?
Yeah. I'll just talk a little bit about my copying history, or my history a little bit. I studied art history in college, was talked out of going to art school, which is what I really wanted to do. That's a whole other story, but did as much as I could. And so didn't get the training that I really wanted. So I had careers of different kinds, and later in life just always kept making art. Anyway, at some point, I was taking classes at the Corcoran, and I met a teacher, Natasha Mokina, who taught at the Corcoran and also has her own studio. Anyway, she did great live drawing classes and classes at her gallery, which is called Winter Palace in Georgetown. And she had us start copying stuff, and along with live drawing. And I fell in love with it. I felt like I was finally starting to get the practice and education that I had really wanted in terms of copying. So I can just show you a little bit of the kinds of things we did. Alongside of that, also the National Gallery has great programs, not only the copyist program, but this first, can you see that drawing, the Cezanne?
Yes.
So they have, I don't know if they still have them, well, certainly not with the pandemic, but they had these Saturday drawing classes. So you could come and the group was gathered and somebody would talk about the painting. Anyway, so I went a few times, and this is one of the drawings that I did. I subsequently later did this painting, which I'll show you. This is another one that I did, just practicing drawing, and that actually has become part of my copying practice. This next one is one that I did with Natasha. At her gallery, I think. And well, at the time, I just worked on this drawing as a inspiration for this, which is a version of it, but it's mixed media. It's a lot of it is rice paper, but then I painted on top of it, but using that image, which is something that I've done and played with a lot in my practice. So other things that I did at that time, this was the first one that I did with, whoops, no, sorry, I'm going to show you one more that I did with Natasha. This one is the original is by Whistler. It's called Symphony in Gray and Peach, I think. And the original is in New York at the Frick, and I actually went up to see it and made copious notes, and that really kind of hooked me. I loved the whole process. It was really fun. And then Natasha started talking about doing stuff at the National Gallery. I thought that was great. One of my other teachers at the Corcoran had talked about it, Bill Newman, and he was talking about getting a group together, but it never happened. So I chose to do this, our one Leonardo that we have in the country. And I really wanted to challenge myself. It was very difficult. It took a long time, but I had Natasha's help. She was sort of over my shoulder as I was doing this one. And I was pleased how it turned out. Then as I started pondering this, I knew about the program at the National Gallery. I had these two teachers who talked about it, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to apply and just see what happens. Long story short, it's sort of a rigorous process. You have to give references. You have to paint on a regular basis, and show that you're able, and you have to pass, go through security, screening, and so forth. Anyway, I was accepted and just dove right in. I love Leonardo, and I love that whole era. And so I decided to go to the Italians, since there's certain galleries we're not allowed to copy in. And some of my favorite paintings are in some of those galleries, like the Leonardo and some of his contemporaries. But there are others that are in galleries that are available. So this one in particular, this was the one I started with. The painter's called Boltraffio, and he also was a student of Leonardo. And this was the drawing as it was developing that I did on the my first one. I actually have done this twice. This was the first version that I did. I tried to, I always do this. I look up, I research the artists, their methods, try to replicate what they're doing. The big problem with this one was instead of painting on panel, I painted it on canvas, and also the canvas proportion wasn't right. Anyway, but it was a good start, I thought. I ended up doing this one again after I went onto something else in the same neighborhood, which was this. Oops. Sorry, I seem to have lost you guys. Oh, here we go. Was this one. This is a Raphael portrait. I spent, 7 or 8 months on this one, and also did the frame, gilded the frame, and added these flowers. And then after that, I went back to Boltraffio and did that one again. And this time I did it on panel. I'm not going to show you everything because I don't have a lot of time, but needless to say, I've done sort of a lot of this stuff now. in that same genre was this. This is the original. This is a portrait by someone called Luini, who was again another contemporary and student of Leonardo. And I loved this portrait of this woman. At the time, though, and for years, I've been really concerned about ecological issues and wanted to somehow bring these together. And so this was the portrait I did of her. I don't know if you can see, sitting on her head is an animal is called a pangolin. And it's one of the most trafficked and now highly endangered animals on the planet. And then she's holding a vaquita porpoise, who's also, there's less than 10 of them left. They've just been poached. Well, the other animals have been poached that live in their territory and they're bycatch. Anyway, it's really a horrible situation. So I thought I would bring these two loves of mine together, which I've done a few times. Should I keep going, Twig? Do I still have time?
Fine. We can go back to Bruce.
Okay.
Bruce left off at the Louvre, Marie Antoinette and the Louvre part of his discussion. Twig, can you come back in? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And we'll pick up where you left off, Bruce.
Okay,
Yeah.
is Tanya finished though? I mean, I think.
That's what I just need to know. Do I have a couple minutes or
You
should I
do.
wrap
You
up?
have 2 more minutes before your 10 minutes is up. Why don't you finish up and then we can go back to Bruce.
Okay. So I'll just show you a few more instances of things that I started as a copy, but then decided to augment a little bit. This was a 18th century portrait by Vigie Lebrun. We have a few of her works, but clearly I've changed the background and the cushions just to make it more modern. I was also going to put some endangered species in here, but just haven't done it yet. This isn't quite finished. I'm still working on it. And then another is this one, which is another 18th century portrait by somebody called Rotari, an Italian portraitist. And I was thinking a lot about monarch butterflies. They're also having a really hard time, really struggling. So I decided to highlight them also. This is called Monarch Dreaming. So anyway, that's sort of a way that I'm trying to integrate copying with other things that I think are important. This, I just wanted to show you quickly, was the Cezanne that I finally did based on that one drawing. Or not based on it, that I had done that drawing of. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say was what I discovered the more I did the copies was that I really want drawings first and sketches. So which is I started doing. I would sit in front of the paintings and draw. I just have a few samples here. And then I would also start with a sketch, a painting sketch, which is what this one is. And then the painting of mine that's in the show, this was a sketch that I did of that before I started painting. So anyway, that's a little bit about my process and how, I guess I could talk about it a lot more, but we have limited time. And and I wanted to just mention apropos, on the 19th of this month, I'll be doing a demo and describing much more of my process and showing my process with the copy of the Raphael. And that's on Zoom via the Athenaeum. And I think it's on the website, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is on the website. If you go to our events page, and there's the link right there for you to click on and join on the 19th at 10 a.m.
And also, I'll be leading an in-person workshop, copying workshop at the Athenaeum on July 10th. And that's also on the website, if you have any.
July 10th is a go.
Yes. That's the in-person workshop. It's an all-day workshop.
Oh, July 10th, got it.
Yes, to learn the, if you're a beginner, or I guess even if you're an intermediate, Tanya, correct? Just come to the workshop and
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Anybody's welcome, definitely.
wonderful. We're looking forward to both the demo and the workshop.
Great, thanks, me too.
So we can go back to Bruce.
Thank you.
Do you want me to go
Okay,
back to that? Can I just make one comment? People have been writing me messages about the size of some of the images, and I can't blow them up any bigger. The file size is just too small. It will just be pixelated. So I'm sorry, they're small. I realize they're small, but that's the size images that we're dealing with.
Very well. So going back, Paul Cézanne once said that the Louvre is the book from which we learn to read. So it tells you how important it was for copying, and when it began at the Louvre in 1793, in fact. So that's quite a while ago. And you can see here, I don't know if this is a group, as we have a small group at the National Gallery of Art called the Master Art Copyists. But you can see they apparently know each other, and they share some of the works that they've replicated of the old masters there at the Louvre. And the last slide I'd like to show about the background and history of copying is from the Ringling Museum. And here you can kind of get an idea of the scale because of the seating. And I've actually visited this work of art. It is it's a tapestry. It was done by Peter Paul Rubens, and the original cartoon, which is the smaller painting, somewhat like Tanya just mentioned about, she'll do a preliminary sketch. The cartoon at the National Gallery of Art is approximately 16 by 20, 18 by 24. It's a relatively small preliminary sketch. And as you can see, this tapestry here, I think measures 25 feet across. So it's massive, but it replicates all of the details in the small cartoon. If you look at the very top, Rubens was somewhat disappointed and mocked the fact that if you look, the rim of the top arched around are cherubs. And if you look closer, they are actually rolling down this scene of a painting. Can we see that? So it's actually, the painting is being rolled up as it would be a canvas. So that was kind of his stab at, why did this beautiful painting of his have to be converted to something of a huge rug or a carpet? And I've actually copied the original cartoon by Peter Paul Rubens. This one is called The Meeting of Abraham and Melchizedek. Great. So going back to my personal experiences at the National Gallery of Art, which is one of many places that have copying around the world with formal programs, is that the National Gallery actually started when they opened their doors. So it was in their bylaws. There was a provision to allow artists to come in of a certain caliber to replicate the old masters. And it has been going on ever since. Right now, there's about a total of 36 copyists. And Tanya had mentioned that it's a pretty lengthy process. I think the process for me was about 9 months. And they asked for the background references, character references, blood type, DNA. No, not quite, but it was pretty extensive. And once you're in, as long as you follow the rules, you can continue copying indefinitely. I learned that even at the Louvre, an artist has a 3-month window to complete a copy. I'll show you a little later, but I've had copies that I've worked on continuously for 2.5 years because of the level of detail and availability of the painting. It wasn't going out on a loan, or it was not in a gallery that's actually being renovated in that same period of time. So this painting here, the first image of the registration form, the permit, is once you've become a copyist and you decide what day of the week you want to copy, you are permitted to come in and you decide on several paintings that you want to copy, and then they'll decide the availability of that painting. And many times they're not available. They're going to be on special exhibit out of the National Gallery, out of the country. And so you do have to have several before they can come up with one that's available for you. This is the album Madonna. And I had been copying, gosh, 13, almost 16, 17 years before I felt I was ambitious enough to copy this painting. Going back, similar to every other copyist, I had a mentor, Gerald King, who was having weekly sessions at his studio. And he suggested some of the artists to apply for the National Gallery of Art's program. And I said, I'm not that good. He said, you're probably not, but the worst you could do is try. And I was accepted, and that was back in '95. And it's one of the most wonderful opportunities I've ever had in my life, to be in front of these original paintings. And my goal is to replicate them as closely as possible. And again, the scaling rules are you cannot exceed 40 inches, no matter how large the original is. So as an example, if that tapestry was at the National Gallery, it would be way too large. You'd have to scale it down to a maximum of 40 inches. It has to be 2 inches larger or smaller than the original. And again, you can take as long as you wish. I've seen artists, not myself, but they've used different types of media, or they will do a fraction of the painting, or they'll modify the painting from the original work. Let's go to the second image of Raphael. So this was the very, very big, this is toward,
Yeah.
there we go. So I don't do any preliminary sketching or anything to prep the canvas except for gesso. This is on panel because the original was on panel. Ironically, in the late 1800s, this painting was actually transferred to canvas from the wood panel. And what I understand, some very skilled individuals went to the back of the original panel and carved it down to the gesso level. And then they were able to then press it onto some linen canvas. But imagine that kind of tedious workmanship. So again, I made a circle with a rope in the center and just made the center, and then tried to outline because it wouldn't have been very helpful trying to do a round canvas on a flat surface. So it is still in the original square, and I've been looking for frames that kind of mimics the original gold and ornate. So the next, you'll see me just blocking in the shapes again, and just putting in, I'm not trying to match color. I'm just trying to get the proportion correct and the scale correct. And again, this was actually 2 inches larger than the original. The original is 36 in diameter. This I took up to 40-inch diameter. Here you'll see a visitor at gallery number 4. Fantastic. And I don't know where she was from. And mind you, the guards are very, very, very studious. No one can come into your space. And this was a dry brush out of my supplies, and she mimicked like she was copying my painting. But this happens constantly, and I really rather enjoy the guest. It's part of the ambiance of copying, and so I welcome anyone to come up to talk to me and to ask about my process.
About how to do this, how to put the call, put the backing in,
So,
how much you need.
so the next
et cetera, et cetera. Very worthwhile.
slide is going to be,
Yeah.
so this is toward the end of the process.
But essentially,
And this is how you take,
what?
Excuse
The
me,
painting.
there's some noise in somebody's background. If you're not Bruce, can you please mute?
I looked at my email since before lunch, so. Right, and
Bruce, is that somebody talking with you?
no,
what strikes me is that the hardest part of this job.
Okay, well,
Old junk.
Tanya, could it be you?
No.
It's
I
it's
think
Ellen Jane.
Jane.
Yeah, please mute her. Thank you. Okay,
Okay,
okay, thank you.
all right, sorry.
fantastic. So at the end of your journey of that copy, you have to get a permit, you have to return that, and also you have to get this property pass. So they make absolute sure, even though it's not the same scale, each permit has a unique number. This one is 7750. They're chronological, and so they can keep a good record of it. And this is all done through the registrar's office. And that's one of their many jobs, but to operate the copyist program. And so again, once you're done, you're free to take it home, to sell it, to exhibit it, without soliciting anything at the gallery, because that's also against the rules. Great. So some of the other activities I do at the gallery, as you can scroll down to the next slide, is entertaining. This was my very, very first copy. And this was done by Brazil. And you may know he was a somewhat of an impressionist artist, and he died in the Franco wars. And it's interesting, this figure, I look at it now, and again, I didn't use a preliminary sketch or any draft or any imagery before I painted this. And I look at it now and I say to myself, 20 plus years later, I would have done so much better a job on it. The colors would have been more vivid. Even the drawing would be more accurate. I look at it and there is a slight more tilt in her head than I've created here. So again, even with your trying the best to replicate, the scaling is going to make a huge difference. And paintings being short of 500 years to 200 years old have changed over those generations. A little caveat, I mentioned the Van Ounce. That painting was, there is a satchel that was originally green, but the original painting, it's now blue because the original yellow was actually fugitive that made the green. So now it's blue, so I replicated it in the same blue that's visible on that painting now. Slide number, yes, 8. Here it is. So the docents come up, and again, because I invite anyone, they will come up with a group, a tour, and ask me to say a few words. But many times there are schools that come from the region, across the country, and from around the world. So here was a group of kids, and I discussed about the basic shapes, and all of them were really surprised by the cherubs that are in the painting. So that caught their eyes, and you can see the original cartoon to the far upper left on this slide. So again, diplomats from all around the world, you never know who the guests and the visitors are at the National Gallery of Art. And last but not least is, almost last but not least, is this painting here. You can see in the background, favorite of the Emir. And that's the permit you saw when I finished the painting. This is about the halfway mark. The interesting thing about this painting is, outside being huge, the frame is probably just as important and expensive as the work of art. It's actually all written, if you go down to the National Gallery of Art, it's written in Arabic. It's writing around the entire, and there's a story to it. And some of the historical staff at the National Gallery was doing research on this, on a frame alone. So it's not just, I mean, the frames alone can be a piece of art. And the other thing is that this painting was off limits to copyists because it was originally owned by the Naval Academy. And it was on long-term loan with the National Gallery of Art. And within the last decade, they actually had a gentleman's agreement to give full ownership to the National Gallery of Art. So one of the rules is you definitely have to, that the work has to be permanent collection of the National Gallery of Art. So that puts a damper on some of the works outside of the galleries being closed or being too small to facilitate copying. The next slide is, this was the last painting I was working on, a Tieblo, before COVID-19. This was March. I was chomping at the bit. I said I would finish this no later than September of 2020. But again, nearly a year later, year plus later, and I'll go back to work on this painting when the gallery opens again. And I think that's my last slide. And again, we'll entertain questions after. Thank you all so very much for listening.
Thank you, Bruce. We'll move on to Tom now, and then we will make sure that we have the questions. And I think I'm going to work with you prior to the end of the show so that we can get some of this on a screen in the Athenaeum Gallery, because these are wonderful stories and wonderful images.
Thank you.
Hi,
Tom, it's all yours.
okay. I'm Tom Sims. I'm one of the newest copyists here. I've only been copying for about 2.5 years. Of course, last year doesn't count because we haven't been able to copy since early 2020. And we're hoping to start copying again this fall. So there's been a long hiatus. I started copying, I'll show a picture of myself copying. Oops, the wrong button. This is me copying my very first copy. I was part of these a 3-year master artist program, which is an atelier style art school founded by Glenn Kessler of Rockville, Maryland. And part of one of the things he gave us, the great opportunity he gave us as students, was to copy. He only had 18 students at the time, and all of us were allowed to go copy. In fact, all of us were told to go copy at the National Gallery. And I didn't really realize that at the time it was an amazing adventure, but I didn't realize also the incredible gift it was, because it's really hard. Oh, excuse me, there's a, it's actually, as Bruce and Tanya said, it is quite a lengthy process to get in, but being students of Glenn Kessler, who was known there as a copyist, we were just waved in and given permits within, a few weeks. And once we had those permits, we were allowed to come back as copyists. I'll just show that next slide, which is, how does this work? There, oops, too far. So this is my finished copy of that painting, which is a Chardin. You can see some of the other paintings by it along the wall, similar ones by Chardin. I actually finished this one more recently. I couldn't go back and copy it. But one thing that's kind of frustrating about copying is that you're in a room where the lights are very different. The light on the paintings is very different than the light on your canvas. And I found out the whole canvas was very dingy and dull after I brought it home in more normal light. And instead of the gray light you get from the ceiling there, you get the gray light from the ceiling on your canvas, and you have the electric light on the paintings, and it's sort of hard to figure out. And so I went home and tried to redo this, and maybe I overdid it, but his actually colors were quite bright. I mean, he was using pure red for the dress and pure white for the apron. I always love this painting because Chardin to me is a very modern painter. He's more about the composition and the colors and about rendering a specific subject matter. I mean, at the time, drawing a face and drawing objects and making a replica of objects were very important. But he also understood how important the negative space is here, the background. You can't take any of it away without feeling somehow the painting is compromised in some way. And I always really admired about that. So when I was painting this, I really wanted to learn more about how he arranged all the shapes and colors on the canvas. So at the time, I wasn't too concerned, and I still wasn't, as you can tell in the next one, that I wasn't very concerned about making an actual accurate copy, like some of the paintings that Bruce and Tanya have shown. I probably have evolved in that, but this is my second copy I did. And I was just amazed by the original painting of this, part of the Dutch collection. And the stories being told. And the stories were actually told not just through the incredible rendering. If you see the actual copy, you can see how much detail there is there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can lean large on this end. I mean, there's buckles and buttons and belts and lots of blood and gore. And this is a really exciting painting, very different than most of the Dutch paintings, which tend to be still lifes and interior scenes of kitchens and things like that. But I wasn't interested in the details. I just felt like at the time, and maybe I was being a little bit, also, I just couldn't imagine I could actually paint all the details. It might have been I just felt there was a composition there that was so interesting, that was built on this diagonal of shapes and colors that led you through the story from the far right of the general, far in the background on his horse, well away from all the action. And then the middle of the action, this sort of this rolling energy of colors and shapes to these two people who were about to kill each other, basically. It's kind of interesting. They each have their swords drawn, and within a second, one of them is going to be the first one to hit the mark. And then far off on the far left, several dead bodies and a man with an arm walking off, totally fed up, probably wondering why they're fighting in the first place. And I thought this is an incredible story, told a lot, not just with the details, but with the composition. And I wanted to focus on that. So I did return to copying after my experience with this art school of the Master Artist program. And I really was feeling was about a year and a half after I left the school, that I felt I needed some sort of ground and just basic skills and something that would just make me feel like I had a structure. I was retired. I felt I needed something that just got me out of the house and helped me practice my painting skills. And I thought this is a great way. And luckily I could go right in without any time, because I did have the registration for my class. So I was given the Monday slot, which is great. I just felt what a great way to start the week. I jump on the MARC train from Frederick to DC. I still see the train go by, and I always go, I used to ride that train once a week. And I look forward to getting back to that. I'd stop to have breakfast at the Union Station. I'd walk from there to the National Gallery among all the monuments and incredible buildings that make our capital city so lovely. And then when I was starting a new painting, I had to enter the National Gallery by a small side staff door. And I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world, that unlike all the tourists, I go in with all the staff and I'm brushed in, going through the machine that, goes, make sure you're not carrying any weapons on you like everybody else does. And there are all the other staff behind me going to their various slots in the gallery, which I think would be incredible jobs. So I always get a big kick out of that. You have to go into the side door when you have a new canvas. You have to go in because you're bringing something into the gallery. You can't bring something not registered into the gallery without going through the staff door. Someone from the registrar comes out and meets you outside the gallery, and they stamp the piece. and measure it and make sure everything's okay. Then you're allowed in. After that, you can always go through the main door that the tourists use too. So I always got a real super kick out of that. Let me see what's my next painting here. Yeah, this is the one that's in the gallery, and actually my almost most recent painting. I did this, I think early, what was it, 2019, or the middle of 2019, or maybe late 20, I can't remember. But I always marveled at this painting. I've known this painting since I was a kid because it's been hanging in the National Gallery. And I've always been attracted to landscapes. Most of my work has a sort of impressionist feel to it. I'll show you one of my own works soon. And there's something about this, when I saw it, I really felt connected to it because it feels very much like Maryland, rolling hills. I grew up in a field. I grew up on a farm, actually, with hills just like that, and cows just like that, and trees just like that. We did not have a mansion just like that you can see in the middle. This painting was done for that, the wealthy man who owned the mansion, and at that time, John Constable was a well-known painter. And I always wonder when he was given the consignment to go paint his mansion, that he really thought it'd be relegated to one small square inch on this huge canvas, but and really featuring the cows more than his incredible house. But I think at the time there was a sense of a love of the outdoors, and the artists were all starting to paint outdoors. You can tell that Constable painted outdoors just like the Impressionists did. This was probably not painted outdoors. It was probably painted from studies he did outdoors. But I just marveled at the light and the feeling of summer, and I just wanted to be there, like playing with the cows and the swans. And I tend to simplify or sometimes edit things in my opinions if they're just too hard to paint and they're just gonna be a struggle. I want to be able to learn something each time I paint. And I really came to this painting with the idea that I want to just learn about how he made this feel like a summer day, especially the clouds and the light on the trees. Just feels so full of sunlight, and it's hard to get these colors accurate. It actually looked like maybe the fence and the cows were hard to paint, but actually for me, the clouds were the hardest. I could never get that exact right contrast of the darkened lights. It looks like clouds are white, but they're actually sort of a more of a beige tone, and it looks like skies are blue, but sometimes they're more of a pinkish, grayish tone. And so I really worked on that. And I painted the sky at least 4 or 5 times, whereas the cows I did pretty quickly. I really just to give a little feeling of what it's like to be a copyist. I just get such a kick out of not just walking in the side door, but also walking through the gallery, carrying my supplies and a messy shirt. With a very serious mind, I'm going to my slot, and all these tourists are on there wandering, like, "Ooh, where am I? What's this like?" And I work here. Get out of my way. Well, don't say that, but I feel like this is my home. And there is something about, you were there for months on end, and it just starts feeling like this is my studio and this is my home, and these are my guests who come up and talk to me. And so, like Bruce had said, one of the fun things, you have to be a little bit of an extrovert to work there, to paint there, because you're going to have a lot of people come up to you almost all the time, and there's going to be people around you. But I especially like the kids because, first of all, they come up and look at you with this incredible sense of awe, like, you're like a famous painter, right? Because you're painting a famous painting, and they think you're just as famous as the people in the museum. And also, they tend to get really perk up because you can see them sort of flagging, walking through these galleries, being told the history of all these things. And suddenly they come to somebody actually making a painting, and they realize, like, these paintings on the wall were just made like I'm making a painting. Maybe the skill level was higher, but still, there's just somebody who worked at a easel with paints in front of them and dirty brushes and all these things. So I think they really start to perk up, and I've gotten so many great comments from kids who come in, and often very perceptive comments. I also meet people from all over the world. I mean, from Turkey and China and Japan. And actually this lady came up and said, "I've been there. I've been in that building." She told me all about it. She said, "It looks just like that." This is still a National Trust building in England, and she knew exactly where it was. That was pretty cool. Sometimes it gets to be a little much. I'm there from about 10 o'clock when it opens to 3 o'clock. So around 2 o'clock, I put on my earphones just to block people out, and most people respect that. I don't want to talk right now. I want to get something done, and it's such a wonderful experience. Now, a little bit about I have often thought about is there another painting after this? Oh yeah, this is actually a painting that I did just to show you what I do on my own. This is a scene of a place I was in France several years ago that I sort of put together from memories and drawings and photographs. It actually isn't an actual scene.
Hey, Bruce, Tom, I just wanted to
Yeah.
give you a time check that it's 2
Oh,
o'clock.
Oh,
Just so you know.
okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really almost done. So I just said for me, copying is not just about making, well, it's often not about making exact copy. It's about learning something about the composition or color. Though the more I copy, the more I realize actually making a really exact copy tells me a lot about what I don't know. And it's easy to try to avoid those things. But this painting I did it myself. I struggle with it. Sometimes copying is a really useful technique. And I was copying this painting at the same time. And I said, darn it, I know the color I knew this guy needs to be. And I literally just took the exact same color from this painting. This is the original, not my copy. And I literally just copied the color straight from this painting I was working on. So sometimes the copying can be very useful that way. So that's the end of my talk. I hope I didn't talk too much, and I will stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
We have some questions, so we'll go through those. And I think the first one is from Alice, and it's to you, Bruce.
Yes.
Of the many copies you've done, which gave you the most pleasure, and which one did you find the most challenging?
Well, it's interesting because each copy I try to complicate myself a little more, challenge myself a little more. So I would say the more recent copies, I've done 25, no, 30 in the last 25 years. So I would say the album Madonna was one of those challenges. What were some of the others? They're all pretty complicated. The Dead Game, Still Life. There's one I did by an artist that we call the Meeting of the Preacher, and that was a very complicated. And figure. When I say complicated, when you're doing figures, and again, I'm trying to replicate as closely as possible. When you're doing figure and portraiture, it's a lot more demanding to have a face look like that face or that figure versus a tree or a mountainside. So those with figurative work and portraiture, I find a lot more complicated in general. So to label one or two, I probably, would say the album Madonna and the Dead Game, even though there were no people. Well, there were people. It was Diana at the bottom. So yeah, I would say those two were the most complicated.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question from Susan Samuels to Tanya, and she has a question about media. What was the reason behind using rice paper and mixed media?
I think just to mix things up a bit. I really like rice paper. I really like mixed media. I do it a lot in my own work. And so I had this idea that developed of doing a combination where the skin would be painted and everything else would be something else, like rice paper. I have one that's sort of in process. So this background is rice paper, the skin is painted, and then the dress would, again, either be painted or rice paper. I just like the way it worked. This one, which is the same, actually one, for instance, so her hair is rice paper, which I like the way that looked. I've been playing with different backgrounds, and unfortunately I had some I tried to do rice paper on her face. I didn't like it, so I decided to just paint over it. but then I didn't like the way that turned out. So it's just something that's been evolving. I really like the combination, the way it turns out.
Thank you. I do like the sort of mixing it up as well, just to get those textures and just a variety of materials, because we can do that now. So Paulette Lee has a question to everyone, and I think, Bruce, you may have answered some of these questions and others during the conversation, but she had a question about forging, and that forging is copying with the intent to sell it as the original. So has that had an effect on the value of the of copying? Has copying lost its value because of that particular issue?
Actually, if I may just interrupt, this is Paulette. I think my question is now moot because of all the restrictions that were provided, information about the restrictions. Obviously, you can't sell it as the original, but if anybody wants to address copying versus forging, that's fine too. Thank you.
Well, I mean, there are forgers out there that it's interesting that the paintings being forged now that make the most money are things like Jackson Pollock and people that aren't realistic things, because you can drip a painting, and or a Rothko has been forged, paintings that are just fields of color, and of course people usually do it with the idea just to sell it for money. But of course, when we're doing copies here, it's not to sell; it's to learn something. But I think that in a way, Paulette's right, because in a way, copying has lost its value, because at least for most of this 20th century, 21st century, because art schools have ceased to stress the benefits. In fact, our whole educational system has started to cease to stress the usefulness of copying something. Students don't learn to copy cursive anymore. They learn to be creative. Students don't learn to memorize poems. They just have to do creative writing. And I think that's a loss, because you lose some of sort of basic skills and techniques with that. But actually there has recently, in the last 10, 20 years, been a recent resurgence in interest in these traditional skills, which is why I was able to take a class like the Master Artist Atelier, which are now starting to pop up all over the United States. And they really didn't exist 20 years ago. And they basically teach very conservative. You copy from the cast, you know, like artists used to do. You learn perspective, you learn anatomy. And a lot of artists are eager for that sort of education.
And I'd like to add that technology has come so far along that with the right equipment, you can get textures, colors, almost every aspect of original paintings now. And so someone can come in with a very high-end camera, take a picture, and there won't be any restrictions. They can make it the same scale if they wish, with the right photographic equipment, and then the processing to print that out with the right textures. So technology kind of, I think, put somewhat of a damper on forgery. And as far as copying in general, Sotheby's, I've seen within the last decade that they have had markets for original replicas because they know it was done on location, and with all the limited light and other downsides, the naked eye sees so much more than a photograph or an image that you print off of a computer screen, than standing in front of that original work, textures that you'd never see, ghost images that you'd never see, and then having the expertise of the gallery staff to share things that you'd never find out any other way.
I'll just add also that there's a lot of really interesting documentaries and books about forging, because usually the forgers are caught and then they, you know, spend their time in jail, whatever, pay their dues, and then tell their stories. And a lot of them are quite fascinating. And regarding copying for sale, I saw a documentary, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, about a guy who makes his living making copies and he sells them for many tens of thousands of dollars. So there is a market actually for people who really want to, you know, oh, I really want that Raphael in my house. And, you know, they hire people who are able to duplicate them, you know, as best they can, and they're willing to pay a lot of money for them. I have not come across those people personally, but they're out there. So yeah, some people do make a living actually doing this, just so you know.
Good to know. We have a question that's a great one to wrap up this session. And that is by Jana. Jana wants to know what paintings for each of you, what paintings do you hope to copy next and why?
Well, I'm a work in progress. So I was doing the Raphael, what was it, The Pursuit of Daphne by Apollo. And I'm really, really waiting for the fall when the staff of the registrar's office said that they were going to try their best to resume copying. And understand there's quite a bit of space that's necessary for copying. They facilitate the artist with an easel, a tarp, and a stool. But outside of that, you know, you kind of got to have some space, and that restricts the visitor's ability to come up and look at the work. So yeah, my next work is the continuation of the Tiepolo. And again, whenever I start again, I suspect it'll take me another 150 hours before I'm completed, because all the work is done there in the studio space.
Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Tanya?
I had just chosen my next painting when we stopped. And so I had prepared my canvas, and I was actually just ready to bring it in and get it, you know, brought into the building, and everything stopped. So it's a portrait by a man named Lehmann, who I'd never heard of. I'd never seen this painting. I was just walking through the museum, as I do when I'm down there painting. I'll often either take a break or whatever and wander around, and just saw this stunning portrait of a woman that just kind of floored me. I'd never seen anything like it. It's a new acquisition. I never heard of the artist before. So I have my canvas ready, and I'm just kind of aching to go once we're allowed back in. I decided for the copyist or the copying workshop that we would use that as a template for those who didn't choose their own. So hopefully people will be copying that, as I will also when we do the workshop. The one thing I wanted to add also to what Bruce was describing and what Tom has described is that the museum also provides us, there's a locker room, and they give us a locker where we can store our materials, so we don't have to carry them in and out every week when we come, because we only can paint one day a week. And our wet painting also has space to keep in there until the following week. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into the program. And plus as someone said, the guards kind of keep an eye on us, and yeah, it's really quite an honored, I think, process. I mean, I feel quite honored, as I'm sure we all do, to be participating.
It sounds like the gallery really does support the copyist program as it's written into their bylaws. They back it up with a lot of support, which is wonderful to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Tom?
Oh, well, I still have a painting. I was well along on a painting I only had 2 more weeks on, and that's still sitting in the copyist closet because we haven't not been able to go back. I'm not sure even with the gallery open, we'd be able to actually go and remove a work of art from the closet. So I may continue with that one and finish that one up, or I may realize that I lost my enthusiasm for it. There's also probably some really dried out oil paints in the closet too. I don't know what's in I used to put a lot of stuff in my closet, my locker, but I don't really think, I was looking at some of Bruce's, and the Raphaels are really interest me, so especially that circular one. And I haven't done many works from the Italians, so I thought I might do that. I'd like to actually go down there in person and choose a work, because it's a little hard to tell by photograph what it's like. So I plan to go down there now that it's sort of partially open, and start to choose my next work.
Wonderful. Well, keep us apprised of what that
Okay.
will be.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Timeless Traditions will be on view at the Athenaeum through June 27th. It features 15 artists, and the works are really pretty amazing. Also, please join us this Saturday, June 19th, for an artist demonstration with Tanya. Tanya, you're going to take us through copying the great masters from the beginning to the end of using a portrait by Raphael. So you're going to have a video showing the progression, correct?
Yes.
Great. That's going to be a wonderful thing to really witness. And then there'll be a question and answer session as well. We're going to have closing festivities for this show on Sunday, June 27th at 3 o'clock. So please stay tuned. We'll have some wine and snacks, and the artists will be there to talk about their experience with copying. And like I said, we'll try to get a computer screen up so that some of the images that you showed today can be available for this, the closing reception. And then on Saturday, July 10th, Tanya, you will be conducting an artist workshop, a workshop on copying, and that will be from, I believe, 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. And all are welcome to attend. Information is on our website for all of these, and I'll be getting something up about the closing reception shortly. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to the following programs and meeting everybody in person on the 27th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Monica.
you all.
Yes.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great Sunday.
Okay.